hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. The world is waking up, and this is the tipping point.
I'm going to go ahead and switch screens here. We had Mike GHK-Cu taking over my spot. I mean, my God, I'm getting edged out before I even get my show off the ground. I want to be Mike GHK-Cu one of these days when I grow up. Hey, this is the Crossfire Roundtable for tonight. You saw these gentlemen minus Lewis Herms and plus Alpha Warrior a couple nights ago when I was on the road, and those guys had to pick up the load because I could not get a good connection while I was driving on my cell phone. That isn't much of a surprise, but since that time, there has been an amazing, let's say, a leap forward in this Great Awakening battle plan to bring down this global power structure of criminals and killers. And at least that's what I believe. And I think we're going to see an ongoing execution. From the time they started dropping this intelligence on October 28, 2017, now it's starting to play out. They're all incredible decoders on what's happening. Got Mike GHK-Cu, 24-year Navy SEAL. Of course, you know him as the intuitive warrior. We got Lewis Herms. He's a head of the Truth Tour, leader of the Truth Tour, across country a couple of times. And we got Nino, heavyweight boxing champion Josh Reed, researcher extraordinaire. He told me earlier tonight he called this was going to happen with Iran, and now we are in the midst.
Gotta love the technology. Oh boy. All right, so I got 30 minutes. I can just say my little piece. All right, go ahead.
We're gonna jump right into this. So take it away, Nino.
All right, I think Josh. I think we both think the same thing here. I think Khomeini's been assassinated. I think I think they're not saying anything at this time. I don't think this peace deal could have been achieved if he was still alive, first of all, and if the regime was still in place. So I think the regime has been taken out. Khomeini's been assassinated. I know Josh agrees with me. I'm sure maybe everyone agrees with that. And I think they're not saying anything due to the fact that maybe there'll be chaos and civil unrest on the streets, and they need to do this delicately, surgically. And I think there has been a regime change, and I think it's done. I think this 12-day war has ended with the peace.
So, Nino, do you think the theocracy you think their head's been cut off, honestly?
I think they're done? I don't think this would have been achieved with this guy still around.
So
I think
we just got a report in 3 minutes ago. Israeli has assassinated Iranian nuclear scientists in Tehran. This is the worst night of attacks. They're bombarding the region right now where Khamenei and all the clan mullahs live. They are moving in to take them out. Now, to your point.
Whoa, hold on. You're saying this is happening in real time right now?
Right now. Yep.
I bet you it already happened.
Yep.
Well, here's the thing. The ceasefire, I just heard the declared ceasefire. Iran has 12 hours to where the clock runs out, and they have to ceasefire. Israel has 24. So the current missions and operations, which is kind of strange to me, I'm guessing, Mike, you can comment on this if you don't mind, why it's not right now. It's 12 hours for Iran, 24 for Israel. It could be communications cut off?
Yeah, it could be communications, but I think I agree. This is just the clock ticking down. We're going to get the regime change is coming. We're going to get Reza Pahlavi. He's going to be the Shah of Iran, and then they're going to start to have fair elections. So the decapitation, came with the United States dropping those bombs and shooting those cruise missiles in there. So that's going to be known, I think, throughout history as been one of the most amazing military maneuvers by far in history. It's unbelievable. I've 35 years in Navy SEALs, CIA. I've never seen anything like that. It was unbelievable. No leaks, which is unheard of, especially in Trump's first term. So now you have his second term, uh, no leaks at all, and that's unbelievable. So we have Russia basically on board. We have China on board. Russia just a little while ago was talking about maybe they're going to get some nukes anyway, but now all of a sudden Russia's like no, China's no. There's going to
Wow.
be a ceasefire. Don't get involved. Iran, don't
Wow.
mess this up. And we're going to have the crown prince, former crown prince,
It's a Pahlavi,
in
yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's interesting, guys. So if you when we looked at Trump's post about the ceasefire, he said, "I'm giving them 6 and 12 hours respectively to complete missions in progress, their final missions." And I'm like, wait, what? Now, if we remember when the ceasefire came out, Iran immediately said, "There's no ceasefire. We have no deals on the table." And then all of a sudden it came out, yes, there was a deal, and there is a ceasefire, but now we're seeing massive bombardment by Israel in the areas and regions where Khamenei and the mullahs all live. We're seeing that Israel's assassinating other nuclear scientists and other people in Iran. This is 100% regime change. And Donald Trump just said the other day, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change mega? It's underway right now. That's how this deal was done. Um, I've been doing a lot of research on Reza Pahlavi, the former exiled crown prince. This is a British installed agent, and I don't know if it's necessarily what Trump and wants in there. So we'll see how that pans out. Obviously, this is who they are trying to install. I know Israel is trying to install him. Great Britain is trying to install him. We'll see. But this is going to be interesting if it's confirmed that Khamenei is killed in an assassination. This is going to be crazy.
I'm betting on that. I think
Wow.
he was already taken out. I think that's why this peace deal or captured, and they're figuring out what to do with them from here. But I think they would not be able to do that without him being successfully taken out or under some kind of interrogation or that. That's how I see this. I don't think this would have been done otherwise. They had to get this guy out and make the regime change, right, Josh? That's what I see.
Yep, 100%. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, would Khamenei ever come to his senses and do a deal with Trump? The problem in the context of Persian culture is he looks weak. And it's what Michael was just saying is that this surgical precision military operation that we saw over the course of the last 12 days, and I know people hate and hate Israel and so forth, but listen, this operation that we just saw is modern warfare 3.0. This was absolute military precision. What Israel was doing and then what the US did, the psychological warfare in the back end of what happened, of all the distraction that was going through social media, all the shifting and changing narratives. This, from a military perspective, this was absolute perfection and just crazy to witness in real time. And so when I look at that, Khamenei would never survive. So after this is all said and done, if a ceasefire ever occurred between Israel and Iran, the Khamenei regime, the mullahs, they're not going to survive this politically. The people of Iran want strength and deterrence. That's how they rise up against their leaders. So the fact that all of this occurred on Khamenei's watch, he would have been overthrown in the weeks to come anyway.
So I'm going to have a little different spin on this, but I think it's the same outcome. To answer your one question about why the difference between Israel ceasefire and Iran ceasefire, I think it's likely that Israel is actually in country in Iran right now. And therefore they need more time to get out. In fact, the 12 hours is specifically for Israel. They may have only given Iran 6 to have the appearances of we're kind of trying to be fair, right? Because the reality is they have to give them time to get out. Mike could probably speak more to that. I believe in my heart that there were elements within inside Iran that were helping put this plan together. I believe that that actually even the leader Khomeini could have been gone 48 hours ago. Not
Thursday. That's Israel's Thursday night special they're talking about.
exactly. I also believe this is kind of my this is just a speculation. I wrote this on X is I feel that President Trump had a conversation with the Israeli leaders pro and against what we're doing, because I do believe I'm not Israeli leaders, Iran leaders, because I do believe there is some underlining Iran leaders that wanted this for a long time, because we understand the way Iran was in the 70s versus the way it is today, right? It's a completely different country, and the students have been trying to uprising and they get shot down all the time, literally and physically. So my guess is the conversation went something like this. Okay, so here's the deal. We're sending our bombers over there. We're taking out these 3 locations. You're not going to be able to stop it. You won't be able to touch our bombers whatsoever. But I'll give you the opportunity to remove humans from there. And if you put human targets there, we're going to expose you, because then I will say we've already had this conversation ahead of time, which in my belief, that would have put Iran in a lose-lose situation. So if they know it's coming, we can say, hey, look, we did everything we could to prevent human tragedy. And if they were to put human targets in their human shields, then we could call them out and said, look, they intentionally did this because they knew it was coming. Not to mention, it shows our power. When we can show our hand, which we never would do in a case like this, I bet you they cowered immediately and caved in. And for some reason, this is just a gut, guys. I think that the leader was taken out on Thursday, just like you say, somewhere around there. And I do not think we are allied as close with Israel as the appearances are. That's a
Next question.
that's a Trojan
Mhm.
horse that we're looking at, and I'll get into my Trojan horse theory if you want to go around the panel first. But I absolutely believe that these are deep state actors, Hamas, the top of Israel, and the top of Iran, that are fighting each other to try to get us into World War III. And Trump has this Trojan horse that he's been doing that is just amazing. And I'll get into the details a little bit later on that one.
I think right now is when these cells could be activated, to be honest with you. I think there's a report coming out right now that reports are now suggesting that a surface to air missile launcher and radar site was targeted and now burning at Camp Taj at the north of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. I don't know. I think all, like Trump has said, all roads lead to Obama, and I think this is the hunt for Obama. And I think now it's people are realizing what time it is, and it's the walls are closing in on these people, man. And I think the arrests are going to happen, and but I don't think this is quite over yet. I think there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a ripple effect, and I wouldn't, terror attacks. Because the last thing they want, these radicals want, is a smooth transition, and a lot of them are going to be activated, in my opinion.
Well,
Well,
let me
let's
hit on
ask 2
two.
questions here.
I just want to hit on one thing that Nino said, because I know he has to go real quick, Scott. Just so you know, Camp Taj, Iran said ahead of time to President Trump that we're going to hit that location, gave him an opportunity to remove them, and we stopped 13 out of the 14 missiles that were heading in there. So there's no loss of human life. So that may be them just to save face a little bit, because President Trump seemed to know about that one. And real quick, we just heard possibly Camp Pendleton, where my son is, they may have just caught 2 Muslim terrorists on that base, to go with what Nina was just saying. So we're looking into it right now.
So my question is this: to be clear, we know they're saving Israel for last, and it looks like there's an alignment with Netanyahu and Trump and Josh. He's you voiced this with with a lot of passion, and I believe it's true. And Mike, I might want to victory here in conjunction with U.S. over Iran. Once this is done with Iran, you mentioned a Trojan horse here. How does that look? I mean, in the long game that we're moving toward, because I've said from 2020 forward that Israel is the Bolshevik outpost of the Khazarian mafia. And that is the epicenter, in my opinion, of where all the tragedies are coming around the world, all these wars and perpetuation of it. How does this factor into the long plan of making, Israel the final target? And I'm not talking about Israel, the historical aspect, the Israeli people, talking about the mobsters that have always run that place.
Good question. So this started about May of last year. If people were watching, you had the death of President Abraham Raisi of Iran. It was the first time since this regime had came into place with Rouhani back in the 70s that Iran did not blame the West for the death of one of their people. They're like, they wouldn't let the international community go in. They wouldn't let anybody even go review it. Well, why? Raisi, if we didn't know, was kind of an IRGC hardliner. He wasn't as much theocratic as he was military poised. And we know that Israel had a lot of infiltration within the IRGC during that time. You have Kiani, who is the Quds Force leader, who was under house arrest around October and September of last year. So Raisi was taken out internally by the Khomeini regime. This is what started this whole regime change apparatus, right? One of the events that occurs right after this is Butler, Pennsylvania, where we have Thomas Crooks, and on his phone, we hear two foreign countries are listed on his phone. Well, what happens right after that? The fake Joe Biden administration comes out and says there's an active Iranian threat on Donald Trump's life. So what we know is that there's this boogeyman called Iran that the deep state, the globalists, will tend to point towards when they're about to do something. Well, what did Israel do right after that active threat came out? They decapitated Hezbollah in another surgical military precision strike. They did the pagers, which, by the way, they utilized 5G. They didn't use explosives inside the pagers. They used 5G to overload the lithium-ion batteries, producing injuries. These people went to the hospital. They followed them, but then what they did is they tracked their communications, and then the next week when there was a meeting, and I called this, all the heads of Hezbollah went in there and they bombed the shit out of them, eliminating them. So you decapitated this kind of proxy head of Iran's radical clergy. So next we knew that this was going to ramp up. October, you start seeing Reza Pahlavi come out. He starts talking about regime change. This is when we know for sure that this is what's occurring. Trump had to secure the presidency at the time, but we knew he was going to win. And this is where the October exchange of missiles between Iran and Israel occurred. And if we ever noticed, it was always tit for tat. It was always an equal exchange. Israel fires in, Iran fires back, tries to hit the same exact targets. Well, inside Iran, they were arresting military generals in various parts of their intelligence community, saying that they were collaborating with Israel. Today, we find out that that was actually true. That there was a lot of people in the IRGC within Iran that were working against the interest of the mullahs and the clergy and Khomeini. Okay? So there was an internal coup going on with collaboration with the West, whether it was Israel. I think it was actually Israel and just Trump. I think Trump was doing all of this from the back end in Mar-a-Lago. So as we come up to not right now, I think Donald Trump just set up Israel. And this is why it's so beautiful. What Netanyahu did over the last 12 days are international war crimes, crimes against humanity, bombing nuclear facilities, targeting civilian neighborhoods. He did that in Khomeini's neighborhood. They waged war on a sovereign nation without any provocation. He is not going to survive this in the international community. And he had the consent just vote the day of the bombing started with a 61 to 57 margin to sustain the government for another 6 months. He's got another consent vote coming up in 6 months. He's not going to survive that, which means the Netanyahu regime is most likely going to be out in 6 months. You had the Iranian people rising up and asking their government, why are you doing this? What did Iran did nothing to provoke this. Then you have what happened today. Trump comes out and he starts yelling at Medvedev about Iran and arming Iran with nukes. Well, this brings attention. Trump likes to exasperate things and bring attention. Like he brought attention to Tucker Carlson. Everybody goes over there and they see Ted Cruz as the next interview he drops, and Ted Cruz is an absolute buffoon and knows shit about Iran. And it's just showing the neocon, perpetuation of the neocon agenda. Well, he goes out there and he calls out Medvedev. Not even 15 minutes later, Medvedev comes out and responds to him. But what did Medvedev say? Medvedev said, I'll pull it up here. He says, however, Russia has no intention of supplying nuclear weapons to Iran because, unlike Israel, we are parties to the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. He's calling out Israel's nuke program. Now, we all got to remember, the main blackmail is not the intelligence data that Israel has. It's the Samson option. It is the 160 nuclear warheads that Israel has that's pointed at every nation on this planet. And they stole it 1967 from NUMEC in Pennsylvania. They stole it directly from the United States of America. The records show this. So Medvedev is coming out calling out Israel's nuke program. So the question is going to be on the international stage is if Iran can't have nukes, Israel can't have nukes.
Right. And that's going to get exposed.
That's going to get exposed. And so we're bringing attention to this because once that blackmail piece of the nukes is off the table and the Netanyahu regime is they're done. I mean, whether it's 6 months or whether it's tomorrow, they're done politically.
Mike, is this my question is this all theatrics? Is this all gamed out and it's basically for the global public play by play? Is there any wiggle room in how these things play out?
No, it's basically Israel was used to take out Hamas and Hezbollah, which Iran has used as not just their proxies, but also to control their population. So by taking them out, they can't control their population. So they're started taking out, like Josh was talking about, they started taking out some of their leadership. And so there's obviously some infiltration within Iran. That's why I believe that, Pahlavi is coming back. And he's very strong. And this goes all the way back for the United States, all the way back to Desert One, where the Delta guys were killed in the desert trying to go in and do a rescue mission. And we had Jimmy Carter, one of the worst presidents, other than Joe Biden. So Jimmy Carter's now number 2, thinks that the lookalike Joe Biden. But both of these presidents have been instrumental in helping Iran, develop and get to the point where they're a very powerful deep state asset. So they were going to build them up and use Iran, and that's why President Trump came in. He's been in the background, like we've all talked about, making things happen. And now everything's playing out perfectly. They plan this out unbelievably. Now, as far as possibly, there's terrorist cells all over the world, definitely in probably every major city in the United States right now. They have to move very quickly right now, in my opinion, to take down that leadership and show the world that leadership is completely gone. Otherwise, we're going to start to see these terror cells activated because they're going to be like, well, maybe we can, get our regime back if we start to, disrupt everything. That's the way terrorist cells work. That's what happened in Iraq when Saddam Hussein, we came in. He's like the mother of all worlds, and 2 weeks later, he's in a hole somewhere hiding. So it's the same thing with Iran. Same thing. We just came in and hammered the hell out of them even faster. It's unbelievable how fast that was. But yeah, we need to see that regime change super fast. They need to be flying them in right now. And otherwise, we're going to see, I agree with Nina, we're going to see some serious terrorist activity in not just the United States, but throughout the world.
Well, they just had a dry test run on the regime change just, 8 months ago? Syria.
Yeah.
Right? And we didn't see the vacuum in the backdrop like we had saw during the early 2000s, mid-2000s, the 1990s. So let's hope that it goes that way. And I think that's one of the reasons that Trump was in Qatar, he was in Saudi Arabia, he was in UAE, is this was all about planning and scripting. And What is their side of it? Trump, I mean, they're investing $10 trillion over the next 10 years in the United States of America. They have a financial investment in the United States of America and Donald Trump. So they're going to make sure that these plans go accordingly.
Yeah, I believe this is bigger than just de-arming Israel. I think this is the start of de-arming our nuclear apparatuses around the world. I actually believe that it's going to be Iran was the face of it, then Israel. You made a great point there, and I believe it's going to be India, Pakistan, and then we'll move over to the big countries because I think President Trump has that much leverage. We really have no need for nukes ever again based on the technologies that we have with direct energy weapons and the stealth technologies and pulse. And I mean, we can go on and on and on, and the ones we don't even know about. So I think this is going to be the beginning to disarm nukes across the entire world.
That would
And
be great.
I believe it'll be a tit for tat. Is okay, we'll take out 100, China, you take out 100. Okay, now we're going to inspect, you can inspect, back and forth until we're comfortable that they're all gone. But this all goes into the Trojan horse Israel deal, and the Samson option, I believe, is the number one reason why Israel is last, because they also need to be made an example of. And when we're looking really closely at this, if we look at Netanyahu's internal polling numbers from Israel just last year, he was 75% hated the guy. This is internal to Israel, not external to Israel, right? So when the international community gets involved, like Josh is saying, and I believe you're 100% on target, Josh, when they get involved, you know who's going to be supporting that? The people of Israel.
Hmm.
So Trump has used the art of war magnificently here. He's cozied up to Israel. He's even put Zionists in his cabinet that are not acting like Zionists. That's a key, by the way. But he's put them in his cabinet. And then what has he done the whole time? This is why I call it the Trump Trojan horse. So he gets his Trojan horse into Israel. They cannot call President Trump an anti-Semite no matter what he does because he's so close and cozying up to him. But what is he doing? He's destroying the Khazarian mafia infrastructure. Bye bye Hollywood. Bye bye mainstream media. Bye
Bye bye
bye
Vatican.
central banking system. You got
Hmm.
you have the Vatican. You bye bye the corrupt education system. Bye bye agriculture. Bye bye big pharma. All of those are Khazarian mafia controlled apparatuses. So why he's breaking the foundation constantly, he's got his arm around them so they can't say
Yeah.
he's an anti-Semite. It's freaking genius. And I've been reporting on this for a long time, and I was crazy, but now I guess I'm not so crazy. I know, Josh, you have to deal with this all the
No,
time.
we know you're still crazy, Lewis. That's why we love you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Again,
You haven't changed. No.
Well,
Yeah.
to put it simply, you are witnessing the systematic destruction of the old guard.
absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yep.
Play by. Let me ask you this, guys. So, how does, you know, honestly, I believe right now with what you guys are saying, we are looking at a potential first in our lifetime since 47, 48 actual peace throughout the Middle East.
Mhm.
How does Iraq and how does Syria factor into this whole equation? Because let's face it, Saddam Hussein, they said he was a bad guy. He was brutal to his people. Saddam Hussein knew how to keep the Sunni Shias and these warring religious factions from doing what they do. He had to keep his boot on the back of their necks and keep them down in many ways. He knew what he was doing. That's why Colin Powell said to W. Bush, "Look, if you break it, you own it." And look what happened. They wouldn't acquiesce to the Rothschild central banking system. Syria, North Korea, Cuba, these other countries will not acquiesce to it. Libya, look what happens to them. They're all taken out. So what's the rectification in Iraq? What's the rectification in Syria? I don't know much about the new regime in Syria because I wasn't following it deeply when that whole thing changed, so I can't speak on it. But how do these countries over there factor into this evolution of where we think we're going now, that Iran may be at least the theocracy neutralized and it returns to a pre-1980s or 1970s type of a country?
There's actually a working model there. Sorry, Josh, I didn't mean to step on you there.
Oh no, go ahead. I can go in after.
So there's actually a working model that got taken out by Hillary Clinton, and that was Gaddafi's Libya. There was a model that was working in the Middle East that everybody could have used, where how they generated their own income internally, how they had some of the freshest water on the planet. It was green territory. It was not a desert when Gaddafi was running it. The crime rate was down tremendously, and they were actually sharing income from oil and minerals, and it was a very, very
Mhm.
happy country at the time. And therefore, the Clintons went in there. I call it the real world Nasara right? That's more of an example with the real Nasara, not the BS that we hear from other people. If there's an example, it would be Libya. So Libya can show, if they can go back. Is Nino going?
Yeah, I got to roll, guys.
All right,
I do
brother.
got to go. All right, guys.
All right, buddy.
Okay, man.
Thanks, Nino.
So Libya is showing, or showed, how it can be done, but they got taken out by our deep state assets. The United States was responsible for instead of using them as a model, they took them out. I believe what's going on now has so much ramifications. It's not just the Middle East. I believe this will be a way that we can get into Africa and show them how to use water properly, how to have an agricultural system that works, and not to mention, now we have a point of example to say, you want to fuck around, you're going to find out. And I believe this will be the Africa coming around in a very positive manner. I'm saying it's going to be beautiful, and I don't even have my rose-colored glasses on today.
Yeah, Trump is renegotiating the world and liberating nations at the same time. In the Middle East, you have something known as the Shia Crescent. This is Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. And what we have to understand by them, what you guys call the Khazarians, I call the old guard, right? Is that the old guard banking dynasties have controlled them since the 1940s. And they controlled them because if the Shias ever got power and control and unified amongst themselves, they would control all the resources in the Middle East. They would control the flow of money and resources in the Middle East. And that's something that the British extension of the British Empire, the old guard, Khazars can never allow. They need to. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is we're talking about resources, logistics, and energy. The movement of resources, the movement of money, and the mining of resources and the usability of energy and resources. That's what all this is about. And so what we've seen in the 1990s and the 1950s with the implementation of the Shah, putting it in BP oil again in the first Iraq war, we funded Saddam Hussein so he could go against who? Iran, the Shia Muslims who were going to topple the British regime's ploy in the Middle East to consume and control the resources. And then what happened? We pulled the plug on Saddam Hussein. We went in there. He invades Kuwait, which is nothing more than a vassal state for Britain, goes in there, tries to invade them, and they use the United States to put the hammer on him. And then it happens all over again with instigation on September 11th from Israel throughout the early 2000s. So what's going to happen in the Middle East is you're going to see a unification of Sunni, Shia, and Kurds coming together in the context of building an economic system and model for their resources and for the exchange of their resources. And if we look at what Donald Trump's doing, what's he doing? He's going to he'll take Greenland by military force. Why? Because you got $7.2 trillion worth of natural resources there, including rare earth minerals. Why does he want Canada as the 51st state? Because northern Canada houses the majority of the uranium on the planet, as well as trillions of dollars of oil and natural resources. Why did he want the Panama Canal? It's logistics. It's to control the flow of resources. He got Eastern Donbass in Ukraine. This is what Russia wanted Ukraine, Eastern Donbass, for specifically, is because of the trillions of dollars of resources sitting in that area. That's why Hunter Biden, Devin Archer with Burisma were there. Burisma was a mining and excavation company for oil and gas. They discovered trillions of dollars of resources in Eastern Donbass. This is why they were on the board. This is why they couped in 2014 to go in there to control the flow of resources. And so when we start to look at this is a huge resource war that's going on, because what's going to build the golden age? We're talking quantum computing, artificial intelligence. That takes infrastructure. That infrastructure has to be built out with these specific resources.
Hey, Josh, let me throw in there. I want to hit the big elephant in the room. There's actually a bigger one and a smaller one. Maybe they're the same size. We look at the possibility, maybe in our lifetime, who knows, of actually having what all the idiots in Hollywood, every time they get onto a speech or give a speech on an Oscar stage, and I want world peace and all that bullshit, we can have that, but we are never, ever going to have it. And it's why I started pushing on this recently. I keep bringing it up because we have to start talking about this. You talked about taking Greenland by force. I'm not for taking things by force because obviously that puts the United States in a dominant position completely. Now, if it's used to then provide equal flow of resources worldwide. Let's call it Nasara style distribution. I don't care what you call it, and that's what we have. Then that makes sense to me. But power versus force is a question here. How do we eliminate all of that? Two things: 0 point energy.
Mhm. Oh, he froze right there.
Froze.
Who gets most of it when we should be every conversation? Cut the bullshit. Where is 0 point? Release it on the planet. You guys have it, and if we release it, if we can get them to release it, and we have that, that's the end of all wars. That is the end of the fight over resources on the entire planet. And the second thing is, Brett, you mentioned this about the three religions in Iraq, breaking the back of the hold of religion on the human psyche. Because I just spent the weekend. We had the Tennessee event, the New Earth project there with Sasha this past weekend, and I heard Dr. David Martin like I've never heard him in my life. I mean, what he talked about historically, I mean, this guy's had an incredible transcendental leap away from scientists into a higher ascended message, talking about these things, looking at certainly the Vatican on Pope Benedict, I think it was, declared back in 1453 that humans do not have the right to live. That kind of mindset's what has perpetuated this as humans being cannon fodder basically ever since. But I don't see that we ever get beyond the politics of all this discussion. We can be talking heads for the next 100 years, doing the same thing, same type of problems, but the shift of control of power around the planet. We need to get beyond this. We need to push on these criminals to start, exposing these technologies, because energy is everything. Energy drives 95% of the cost of everything. If we all had 0 point energy, the resources on the planet not only are distributed evenly, new wealth is created every minute, new lifestyle, higher experience everywhere. I don't know if we can get to that in our lifetime. I think we can. But why aren't we talking about that versus we need to control oil, uranium? That's again, they're taking all the resources and turning them into weapons to kill people. And this has happened to me, guys, over the last probably more so than any time, 2, 3 to 5 years. And I'm always just like this. Why the hell do we live in this planet where humans are constantly? It's always been just political geopolitics and war. But if we don't start talking about this, we're not going to get beyond this for another 200-300 years.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
it's a deep state white hat, black hat, white hat type thing. So Trump, being at the head of the white hats, so we're seeing something that no one's ever seen before. The black hats being taken out. So the black hats in Iran are being taken out. And once that's taken out, then you're going to eventually, like we've been talking about for a long time, save for last is Israel. So, Netanyahu has been very useful for helping them take down the deep state, the black hats. And now, because he is a black hat, and it's like, this is what you're going to do type thing. And now that you're done, then you're done. You're out. And that's going to lead to Greenland. Greenland will be like, yes, we want to make a lot of money with everybody. And if they don't, that means the deep state's there. And then we're going to go kick their ass just like we did in Iran. And then they're going to be like, okay, we want to make money because those guys are in our way. We're going to see that around the world. We're going to see the end of war. We're going to see the end of all the different things that have been manipulated throughout our lifetimes and generations and generations and generations for thousands of years. That's getting wiped out. A lot of people talk about like this golden age, but here we are at the cusp of it, and they don't get it. I see all these people saying, "Oh, Trump and like Israel, Trump's a puppet of Israel." No, not even close. God, wake up! So this is where we're at. We're basically going to replace all the deep state. It's a magnificent time.
It is, and Scott, you're absolutely right. 0 point energy. And here's what I've seen. This is my observation, and this is what I know. Number one, I talked about building the infrastructure. You got to build the infrastructure for all of that first, right? Yeah. So a few weeks ago, former General Stephen Quast was on Sean Ryan's podcast, and he was talking about beaming energy down from space and trickle down to charge your phone and all this stuff. And then he said something was interesting. He goes, well, this is public information, but China is putting men on the dark side of the moon and they're mining helium-3 and bringing it back to China. Well, nobody knew that, even though it's public information. Nobody knew that. Then you go back to the White House Science and Tech Advisor, who used to was Undersecretary for Advanced Research and Development at the Pentagon. He comes out and says that we now have the ability to warp time and space and put someone anywhere we want on the planet in a matter of seconds. People were like, what? But then, just a few days ago, on the 250th birthday of the Army, Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, says, I just talked to an astronaut on the moon who's a soldier. This is trickle-down disclosure. They're slowly releasing information that is public for us to start building all of this up. So I think that it's already happening, but we have
get
to
into our consciousness, you mean? Getting into our consciousness. Okay.
The UAP stuff, all of this stuff that's happening, we have to build the infrastructure. So the resources aren't necessarily for building new weapons. It's for building infrastructure. And the cool thing is the one thing that we haven't even talked about and touched on here is the financial system. There's a replacement of the global financial system underway right now, and Trump has laid the groundwork for it in the United States with a sovereign wealth fund, with a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and what he is doing economically with the tariffs. This is taking down the central banking system globally, and that is the one key point that we have to remove. So a lot of people, when they look at central banks, I was talking to Alpha earlier, and we were talking about central banks. I'm like, do you know how central banks work? And he's like, well. They said, well, listen, if I have $1 billion of oil in Saudi Arabia and it's going to go to the United States, right? It goes to the United States, it gets offloaded on the trains and in diesels, and it gets shipped to Texas, it gets refined, and then it gets distributed by trains and diesel to gas stations and then gets pumped into your vehicle. But here's the thing, is that company doesn't get paid until that gasoline goes into your gas tank. So how do they pay the $1 billion to Saudi Arabia? Well, that's where central banks come in. The central banks come in and give short-term lending to these large financial institutions. These large financial institutions distribute that to all these businesses. So the central banks control the flow of money and the flow of resources around the world. So once Donald Trump started implementing massive amounts of tariffs on all of these countries, they couldn't take out the loans and afford them with the high interest rates. This is why Trump was saying, Powell, you better lower those interest rates. You better lower those interest rates. So what did that force them to do is those countries to come to the table and renegotiate new deals with Donald Trump to reduce those tariffs that he was putting out there that were so critical to the supply chain. And so what he's done is he's renegotiated the world around the central banks. And the next move that he's going to do with all of this is absolutely beautiful, because it's going to end the Federal Reserve. It is going to bring about an asset-based currency, which we just had the Genius Act that was passed in Congress, which brings in U.S. stablecoins. And think about this as an intermediary away from the Federal Reserve. But many people didn't see this in the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Bill in Congress. There is one provision at the end, and it said, upon approval, the Secretary of Treasury requests from all 12 Federal Reserve banks all gold certificates to be sent to the U.S. Treasury for reissuance. The Secretary will reissue new gold certificates at current market value, and the Federal Reserve banks will have to compensate the federal government for the difference of. So for anybody wondering what that means, is when the Bretton Woods Agreement came out in the 1940s after World War II, we pegged gold at $42.75 an ounce globally. Even today, gold exchange between governments is done at $42.75 an ounce. So the gold that the Federal Reserve holds as collateral for the United States, is the 5,000 tons or 8,000 tons, is actually pegged at $42.75 an ounce. And that's how they collateralize loaning us money on certain interest rates. Well, that bill basically said that they will have to the Treasury will repeg that at current market value, which is $3,500 an ounce, send that back to the Federal Reserve, and they'll have to recompensate us for the difference. Well, the Federal Reserve doesn't have that difference. That puts them out of business and makes them absolutely obsolete at that moment, or at least at the very least allows us to renegotiate terms of debt reconsolidation at that point, or for Congress to take action and repeal 12 U.S.C. Chapter 3. So But before that happens, you have to have a new financial system in place. And that's what the Sovereign Wealth Fund, Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is doing. That's why we're building new industry in Texas and everywhere else throughout the United States. Why UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar are investing 10 trillion into the United States, because they understand where this is headed. But at the end of the day, this is about removing these radical financial systems that have perpetuated war around the world, regime changes around the world, and controlled resource-based trade around the world. And Donald Trump is taking them head on, and he's winning.
So, Josh, I need you in my cabinet because I'm just going to say what he said. I don't have to work. So I don't have to work that hard. What I did hear, though, that you said is, are you trying to indicate that we never lost the technology to go to the moon?
We definitely did not lose the
Oh,
technology.
wow.
We're just not
Revelation.
telling people that we built a military base out there, because there's
I know, but I thought the Draco controlled the dark side of the moon, and when when they say we went up there, they basically kicked us out. All right, I'm just going to throw this at you. Did we ever land on the moon or not? All bullshit or not?
my honest opinion. And from what
No.
I've gotten, 1969, what people watched on television was not the moon
In the
landing.
theater. Yep.
That was a national security threat, that if the mission
Every-
failed, that
every
Russia
Apollo
would have won the Cold War. So what
Yeah.
they did, Kubrick in the basement, what
Yep.
you saw was theater. They actually went, but you didn't see when they went. What you saw was the theater, because it was such a big national security concern. If that mission had failed live on TV, we would have lost the Cold War.
I
It
actually
was Star
believe
Trek, Star Wars, you name
Yeah.
it. It was
I-
basically
it's-
theater.
every Apollo mission.
But we
Not
were there.
one Apollo mission was successful. Not one. In my post that's another story, but not one Apollo mission in my opinions. Hey, Scott, real quick, back to 0 point energy. You're dead on there. I actually, believe it or not, crazy talk again, have solutions for that I'm working on, that I'm going to be launching onto the campaign platform in about 2.5, 3 months. Real life solutions on this. I'm actually going to be sitting down with a couple companies in regards to this, and what you're talking is real and already exists. Obviously, most people know that, but there's actually companies, legitimate companies, that are being cleared. The way is being cleared for them to do something, let me say, close to what you just mentioned. Very, very close. And can you imagine the influx of business coming to California when we accomplish that?
Yeah, one thing that doesn't concern me, but I'm questioning if we're building ongoing architecture to support what their bullshit fossil fuel philosophy of energy model, whatever you want to call it. If we keep building architecture for that, in my opinion, it's a waste of money. Maybe it has to be done, like you said, temporarily until the job is finally done on taking down the entire black operation on the planet. But I wonder, we've heard this. I had somebody tell me that their son works for General Electric, some type of engineer, and it's true. They are manufacturing med beds secretly, privately. I'm only putting it out there. I have no clue. I'm not saying that it's real. I'm just telling you what I've been told. So if they are, is there massive production going on around the world? And if so, is it underground to mass produce these technologies? Because if that isn't happening, then we have 100 years before we get there. If it is happening, it has to be done under the cover of darkness, because if it's put out here slowly, again, you're going to have the people who are getting it first, or the people who are getting it first are going to be attacked by those who need it but don't have it. So this has to be this mass simultaneous distribution of these kind of technologies worldwide, not overnight, but pretty damn close. Inside of 6 months or a year. So other people who potentially are going to die because they don't have access to technologies, aren't feeling like they've been shafted, left out, creating dissension among the people. It's almost an overwhelming concept of how they do that and try to keep a society from breaking down because some are getting it first and others aren't. Just questions that I ask, no answers for.
Well, I mean, I can jump in. So, this is my thoughts on this, and this just comes from years of research kind of into these sectors, knowing quite a few of the whistleblower UAP guys that have worked on some of these projects. So do you guys remember on January 1st, the Cybertruck that blew up in front of Trump Casino in Las Vegas?
Yep.
Yep.
Green Beret Matthew Leifelsberger. So that whole thing was the deep state taking him out. They killed him. They remote detonated the bomb that he had set up. His objective was to actually get out of the vehicle, blow it up when nobody was there, to bring media attention to himself so that they could not kill him. So he had a manifesto that they said he printed out, but that was what was on his phone, and the feds came out and said he had. 2 days prior to this, he emailed a manifesto to a podcast, and it's been confirmed legitimate. In it, Michael, we talked about this last time. You know, he was talking about, I am not under duress. My first vehicle was a 2006 black Ford Mustang. His actual vehicle was a 1998 Ford Mustang, which is saying that he's under a state of duress. But he goes on to talk about that. He goes, I don't know why they tried to take me. Wait, what? So he comes home on leave from Germany, and they tried to take him. And so that's why he goes on this rampage down south, rents the car, buys the weapons, and goes to Las Vegas. And he says it's either because of this genocide that as a Green Beret we committed in 2019, or it's because of the project that I'm working on right now with anti-gravitic drones. And he says the drones in New Jersey are Chinese anti-gravitic drones and are anti-gravitic drones. So this was interesting because you start looking into this. A few weeks later, Tucker Carlson comes out and starts talking about a satellite that's shot out of the sky that was China that went over Texas and Arkansas. And he says that this was a quantum entangled communication satellite that was a command and control center for the anti-gravitic drones. So what we begin to see is that China, we know, stole U.S. deep special access program, unacknowledged special access program technology. I laid this out in my original thesis on Q and all of that stuff. The multi-domain battlefield of how there was people in our government selling military secrets. We saw this in Hillary Clinton's classified emails. These were SAP programs, special access programs, and how that arranged with the Obama administration and what Trump did with the China initiative when he first came in. So we know that they were getting this technology. Well, here's the key, is China's now developing this technology and moving to full production. We can't wait. We can't wait to take this technology and commercialize it and get it out there, because China has a different manufacturing and processing aspect than us. Ours is compartmentalized black projects that aren't commercial, so you can't mass produce these things. China is all internal to itself. Its manufacturing and processing is a part of their government, and they can mass produce this technology way greater than we ever can. So this is why we're seeing this trickle down, because we have to get this technology beginning to get manufactured. And this is why you see the tech bros with Donald Trump. This is why you see Elon Musk. This is why you see Peter Thiel. This is who are going to go out there and bring this to the mainstream and begin developing these technologies. And I would say 5 years max, we are going to have these technologies that we're talking about.
In abundance, yeah. So you have to take down the people that have been suppressing this. Yep. You have to take down the judicial system and, you know, the deep state systems that have been suppressing this and killing those people that have been trying to bring these technologies forward. So once that's another thing that, you know, Donald Trump has been working on. Everybody wants to see things happen right away, but there's like a massive, you know, resistance. We saw it from his last administration. He overcame a lot of that, you know, over the 4 years that he was out of office, so to speak. And now, you know, things are starting to roll very quickly. So it's going to happen. But here in the United States, you know, like Josh was saying, in China, they can roll this stuff out because their whole country, the whole manufacturing process is all about, you know, working together and moving together. Where ours has been compartmentalized, lied to, manipulated. It's all broken up. So you have to go through all these different levels to get that out. Just like, you know, they can bring some of these people to trial or, you know, to justice, and then you have these, you know, justices that are like corrupt. So they're going to like throw stuff out, and then all the man hours, all the work, all the, you know, people have been put at risk to bring some of these people, the Nancy Pelosi's and all these other people up for, you know, possible trials. It gets thrown out. So it's the same thing across the board with all these technologies. So you have to take care of the judicial. You have to take care of all of the people that have been, you know, suppressing all these different companies that they steal that technology and use it for themselves selfishly, and then make themselves rich and their little cronies rich. And we all of us have talked about this, and that's something that's going to be that not only has already been exposed, but has to be, taken out. I think it's going to happen very quickly. It's going to make people's heads roll how fast it's going to come now, because we just saw it with Iran, and we're going to start to see things happen that quick, boom, 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 all around the world. I mean, we could talk for hours on how many relationships Trump's already built. Just for example, in Great Britain, working with the new prince that's going to be king soon. They have a good relationship already. Both of them like each other, and they talk highly of each other. So we're going to see, around the world, these deep state actors basically get taken out, and then from that point on, things are going to just rock and roll so fast. I mean, look at some of the technologies that we've had, the computer, cell phone, how quick those came out. I mean, Lewis and I can tell you about how we had the rotary phone. And I know Lewis maybe even had the ones where like, hey.
I built it. Yeah, I built it.
Exactly. So, I mean, we've come a long way, but we could have come a long way a lot faster. I talked to a guy that was at RCA when we still had those big TVs in a box, and he says, we already have flat screen, LED. They've had it for 20 years now, but it's like a rollout. They have it all planned. So they got to make money on this one, and then they got to make money on this one.
Such bullshit.
That bullshit's going away. The upper scale technologies are going to come out fast, and people got to be ready for it. But you know how people are like, well, I'm not going to use the internet. Remember all those people? I'm never going to use the internet. It's like, God, really? So I mean, it's
some
be
folks that are in
fast
their
as
80s,
people
they're
can
like
handle it.
junkies now.
Yeah.
Well, and this is that on a times 1,000, right? This is the .com boom times 1,000. We're talking
Absolutely.
about quantum communications, quantum sensing, quantum technologies, quantum computing. We're talking about artificial intelligence, convergence with quantum technologies. And, the big race right now, the Cold War that's going on between the US and China, is artificial intelligence. And this is one of the aspects of the resource war, right? Who can produce as much energy as needed to feed the AI to bring it to singularity as fast as possible. And I know that sounds scary for a lot of people, but we have to understand that if we don't do it, China's going to. And if China does it, well, you're going to get that new world order, not Trump's world order, right? And there's an interesting thing that I think happens, and we all know that there's ETs here and there's all of this stuff going on, but we look at their kind of grand introduction to the world. And I thought about this a lot, and I was looking at Star Trek and Prime Directive and kind of how all this operates. Now, first contact is typically made when a civilization achieves a certain level of technology, but you don't interfere with them when they're in the production of development, because you could destroy them or they could destroy somebody else. But once they hit a certain level of technology, like interstellar travel, you want to make sure that they're not going to kill themselves, start a war, destroy themselves, or go out and kill somebody else or interfere with another developing situation. So you intervene. Well, AI is one of those technologies that does exactly that. And I have it from good sources. We already have sentient AI. We already have artificial intelligence that is merged with quantum computing. Google Quantum AI is exactly that. They've been aggregating data into it for the last 5 years. But I don't think anything's hit singularity. I think we're probably a year or two away from singularity. And when that does happen, you could see the 2027 timeframe, we see first contact actually occur, which everything changes then.
Yeah. That might be the one thing that breaks a back of religion and it's holding the planet. So all you folks out there that are extremely religious or biblical followers, don't take that the wrong way. I'm a born-again Christian at 14 years old, studied divinity for 20 years. It is not that. It's the dogma of us sitting back. And I've said this many times from church stages around the country. And I haven't been beat up. I've never had a pastor not say, thank you for coming. But, we were told they tacked this dude on a cross 2,000 years ago so we'd be saved. At 14, I was told, look, if you don't become a born-again Christian, you're going to go to hell. So how am I saved? We go through that process. Now they teach us to sit back and wait and take this beating on the planet and wait for Christ to return to save us all. I'm like, no, wait a second. That's 3 times how many times we need saved. And you start looking at the historical construct of religion itself. call God whatever you want, source, God, creator, almighty, Allah, Butch, Sally. I don't really care what you call it. People get caught up in the sentiments, the sentiment of language. But the reality is, as Christ said, these works you will do, and even greater than I. This is an inside job. We have to be. He said, the kingdom of heaven is within. They've taught us to look outside, look up, look out. Don't look in to where all of that resides. That's something that has to be broken, so people start to realize they are responsible for their own spiritual ascension. I've listened to different whistleblowers, secret space program whistleblowers over the last 8 or 9 years, and they all say the same thing. The biggest fracture of the human psyche on earth is what you just said, Josh, when there's not first contact for humanity, first contact for the masses around the world, to see or learn or now know there is highly intelligent life that now is exposing itself to the world. That's supposed to be the one thing that breaks the hold of this thing called religion on the planet, but it's going to create a lot of psychological chaos. Some people are going to be in bed for like 3 weeks. You're going to have to help friends or family or parents get out of bed, get them showered, get them fed, because it's going to completely fracture their minds to realize all of it has been bullshit all of our lives. That doesn't dismiss the importance of the avatars on this planet, the messengers, Christ, Hare Krishna, Buddha, Muhammad, all these great people who have contributed to that all of their messages and all of their lives and their missions and purposes were distorted by this crime syndicate, sophisticated crime syndicate, on how they can hijack it and, of course, use it for their own political and power purposes. To me, I can't see any other way that it breaks a grip, because we've been programmed to sit back and hope and pray our way out of shit. And honestly, if that worked, why are there 8 million kids a year being butchered in a satanic ritual abuse machine? It doesn't work. Like, how can people not draw the conclusion this is not working, right? So I had somebody in one of the things that we're working on, have been working on for a couple of years, telling me, look, you need to be a certain way, because we're bringing people to Christ, with what we do. Therefore, your language is not, really acceptable. And I'm like, well, let me be very clear. I'm not here to build a church. That's not why I do what I do. There's millions of churches in the country. If they did their job, or it was effective, I wouldn't exist. Patriot Street Fighter would never been created. We're doing this because the whole concept of religion has not delivered victories for humanity. It's basically made us, neutralized us, neutered us, and made us easy to control. I know that's a very a direct frontal assault on the idea of religion, but I'm not going to change my mind, because it isn't just something that occurred to me. It occurred over decades of study, contemplation, and trying to figure out, how the hell did we get into this? How the hell do we get out of it? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I think there may be more hope than you believe, because I spoke in front of a church this weekend, and specifically on this matter. And I talked about how that the corporate churches have been manipulating us for centuries. And the example I used most is, they would indicate to you that Matthew 5:5, the meek shall inherit the earth, translates to weak and docile. And I said, guys, this is where you've been manipulated forever. If you look at the translations through the Bible, it went through several iterations, and then it had to go through Greek. Well, if you look at what Greek means for meek, it was translated from a word called praus, and praus is an actual Greek horse that does what? Protects the other horses and those that can't take care of themselves. He's the fighter of the group. The true definition of meek is those who are willing to step up and fight for others that can't fight for themselves. Those that will step up in the face of adversity. We've been conned by the corporate churches for centuries, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we needed to shut our mouth and pray. No. The Bible specifically talks about this, when God needs you to step up. And that's why I've been saying forever, we the people are the plan. It's us. It's we the people can work in unison, and we have the strength to do so. And I was blessed to get an actual standing ovation based on me calling the churches out
Mm-hmm.
and saying, guys, you've been lied to. They want you to sit on your ass. Why? Because they can control you.
Bingo.
But
Bingo.
if you understand the true meaning of the meek shall inherit the earth, everybody would be working as hard as they can to take back our cities, our towns, our countries, and the world. And there is no place for churches, in my opinion, in the future. I think many churches will have to dissolve, especially if they think that we're going to go through another mandate, because that is the opposite of what a church should be. But that's the control mechanism that's been set up for this long. So yeah, I
And
think this is a fascinating conversation. I do think there's hope, though, because there's at least 700, 800 Christians there, and they stood up and they absolutely agreed with what we were talking about.
Well, I'm
now,
telling you, the Reawaken America tour, I was on that for 2 years, and every month, and maybe more than half of them were in these large churches. And I've said it virtually every time. Again, religion is the worst thing that has ever happened to humanity. Again, you get innovation, and I countless times, either prior to go on stage and speaking or after, but I've had pastors, their wives come up, thank me for what I'm doing. We watch you all the time, and I'm like, I always say to the wife, your husband allows you to listen to this language, really? They always laugh at it, which also mystifies me. But I've had nothing but support. I can't remember the church. It's a great church in Winter Haven, and that pastor, he actually called me not long after that and said, "I just want you to know, Scott, we have your back." That's the real Pastor Dave Scarlett. Same thing. This
Pastor
is
Dave
how
Bryan, that's who I was with. Same
Dave
thing.
Bryan, yes, same. Yeah, we had an event there, Dave Bryan's place. These pastors are the ones that do come up to me. In fact, I've never had one ever be oppositional to that message. And I thought, I've said a number of times, I wonder when they're going to remove me from this tour because of the stuff I say. Well, eventually they did, because quote unquote, I'm a weapon to hammer away on the Trump family because I'm an anti-Semite, that bullshit. But I honestly thought it would be the other things that I say to make a not like a confrontation of the idea of the church itself and religion. And honestly, in fact, saying these things before that tour ever started here on a podcast, to see what goes on in the chats, it's extremely encouraging to me. And it's not because of me, it's because people are intrinsically inside their own spiritual realm, inside your own soul. They're coming to this conclusion themselves. They're seeing the world and what's happening to the world. And the churches they're a business. It's a massive business. And I'm just happy they're coming to that conclusion. So I'm glad you said that too, Lewis, because I'm not the only one that thinks that way. So therefore, it must really be happening that they're losing that grip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like with my book, The Intuitive Warrior, which I released like 15 years ago, I would have pastors call me up and thank me. And then I'd hear from other pastors, I promoted your book and I got attacked. I got ran out of my church. I was like, wow. And so
Wow.
you're seeing, both of those. And I talked about how I had remote viewing abilities, and I would have pastors come on and say I'm like of the devil and all kind of crazy stuff. So,
Really?
we're seeing that basically break down.
Mm.
People are seeing through that. Some of those pastors that attacked me basically got ran out of their church when people found out that they were actually bad. So that's we see that. That's what the deep state does. They point fingers at those of us that are trying to awaken people as we're bad, and then eventually it's boomerangs back on them massively. So we just keep doing what we're doing. We're waking up massive amounts of people. We're more the voice of the world than any news organization at this point. So I
Very
think it's
true.
really, really catching hold, and people are fascinated by the conversations that we have. I'm fascinated by the conversations we have, and I'm involved in them. It's like it's great. It's a great conversation, and people are very enamored of the things that we talk about. They love this information, and they want more of it. So we're giving them more, and as things expand, so I know that some of the stuff that we've been putting out for a long time, now I'm starting to see it higher and higher up,
Yep.
and it's very, very encouraging to see this be released. So I don't have no doubts that once the alien thing becomes more mainstream, it's already mainstream to me. Like the secret space program, it's not secret anymore. It's space. It's a different space program that's been developed, and people have been involved in. And a lot of those people have awakened to that. Even though there's process of trying to erase memories, they can't erase. Just like you can't erase a computer, chip, you can still go back in there and get the information from it. So that's what's happening for a lot of people. They're awakening to all of these things. It's like that 100 monkey thing where, all the monkeys, wash the potatoes or, knock something and break it open. And the monkeys on another island just like, oh, we can do this too. So that's what we're doing that. Humanity is awakening faster and faster and faster.
Yep.
Big question.
Well, I just want to touch on just one real quick. So, Lewis, you're talking about the meek, which is Pross. It's interesting too because I think that those were actually war horses. So those are horses of war that came back to the farm and then worked in solitude, but protected all the other animals on the farm.
Exactly
That's
right.
for everybody out there. That's meek. And then, Michael, what you just said right there, it's us. Scott, a lot of this that's going to bring about that transition. That's why we took over the idea of information. That's why we are who we are and doing what we're doing. We had to get rid of the mainstream narrative. We had to get rid of the mainstream news. We had to take over this whole idea of this information domain because if we control it, now that people are in touch with truth. And in the context of like people understanding, Christians are getting it. I'm telling you, there's some amazing people out there, and they see it, and they're welcoming it, and they're loving it. And I think that they realize, and a lot of these churches and congregations that we see coming up today are coming up because they're rejecting these big mega conglomerate churches, rejecting what has been taught for the last 100 years, and you're seeing a lot of different kind of flavors of it show up. So I think that we're on the right track.
Well, I have a comment and then I have a big question. It's going to be interesting to see how you guys, I want to hear each of your answers on this. First, I got to say, and this is a big compliment. Josh, you know who Josh reminds me of? When we were in grade school or maybe junior high, we'd read these books called Encyclopedia Brown. You guys remember that? Encyclopedia Brown. This dude knows everything. Like some of the shit he says, I'm like, how could you possibly know all that, right? So it's like we got our own encyclopedia around here.
What he said.
I'm like, does Josh have a life? Like, what, dude? Like, what do you?
This is my life.
It's fascinating. So here's a question.
Horrible time to break
Yeah,
up right there.
you're going to have to repeat it, Scott. You're frozen.
Those fun memes that come out. And, one of the reasons we talked about...
You have to repeat it. You were frozen.
Oh, okay. Am I still frozen?
Nope, you're good now.
Yeah. For some reason on my end, I was going to ask you guys, on my end, I see that this freezes for me from time to time. It might be my Starlink is not completely clear of these trees here in Pennsylvania. But so we know that, as I've said, look, they could wipe out the dark powers on the planet literally probably in 6 months. Just full on 22 nations, 33, whatever it is, militaries, wipe them out. If the people don't wake up to it all, we don't go through this great awakening, we lose, because our consciousness has to have this leap from the recognition of what happened to humanity, the grotesque annihilation of humanity. And it's like World War II, never going to let this happen again. That has to happen to humanity and consciousness so it never happens again. So that being said, we the people have to do this. No, it's the white hat powers that are doing what they're doing. They're clearing the path, but we have to be the ones that ignite this transcendental leap. So the question always is, because the question is, okay, what are we going to do in 4 years when Trump's gone? Who's going to carry the torch that this guy is carrying? Right? That's why we have to be the ones we count on. But there's got to be something in the background. You guys, we know there's something planned out long term here to keep this thing moving forward. What is it? Is it that Trump was, elected in a U.S. corporation election system or cycle, and now is in the return of the republic, he can continue to run? Or is there something else? Is somebody else going to rise? Is there a JFK Jr. who's going to emerge and step into that role for, a couple of presidencies? If he's alive, some people believe he is, some people's not, doesn't believe he is. What does that look like? How does this thing keep moving forward? More Trump, post-Trump? How do we keep it going?
It's divinely inspired. So Trump, I think, is divinely inspired. So the person that is going to be taking his place is being prepped. We don't know who that is. Just like Yeshua ben Joseph, he was prepped. He may have been the one that goes all the way. He may not have been. There were several that were being prepped. John the Baptist being one of them. So there's many people, I think, they're in transition to take over for Trump, and I think Trump was divinely inspired into this position. The number, the numerology, all kind of crazy stuff has aligned just perfectly. There's no way that could have just happened randomly. Couldn't have planned it out. Could not have planned it out. So there is someone, I believe, that will take that place. Just like we didn't get the word that when the attack was going to happen on Iran, although I said it 2 hours in my show, I was like, it's probably going to be tonight. And then it happened. Yeah. So you kind of like get these feelings, and you don't share them sometimes. Trump probably knows who the next person is. Is it a woman? Is it a man? Is it someone that's in position right now that can step up? It remains to be seen, because I can tell you, like in combat, I could have been leading my group in special forces. I get taken out, and then somebody just steps right up, and there's not a beat missed. So at some point, someone is going to assume that is going to step up. We won't know that probably for another couple of years, but it will come, and whoever that is, it will be perfect. Or it could be a distraction. Could be somebody else. You never know. But I think it's going to be divine, and it's going to be magnificent.
Lewis?
Well, I believe it will be divine. I believe under a constitutional republic, we don't need a person to step up. The way the constitutional republic was originally formed, a president didn't need to do anything. All they would have to do is they would have to do a State of the Union speech, institute a War Powers Act, or emergency declaration. That's pretty much all they did, and that's really the way it should be. So I believe you'll probably have 50, 100, 200 people stepping up and running their states, their counties, and their cities divinely, just like you say. But the reason why is because through this process, what we are doing is we are clarifying and cleaning out our pineal gland, our instinctual systems, and
Great point.
we're finding this direct connection to God Almighty Himself, where we don't need somebody standing on a stage anymore for us to connect. When we start cleaning up our pineal and our systems, get us back to a constitutional republic, and have that direct connection, we don't need a leader anymore,
Love it.
because we will work symbiotically together, and it will
Love
be
it.
beautiful.
I'm glad I'm not interrupting you. You can keep on going. I'm just pumped because
I like
again,
that man governor of California.
yeah, me too. Hey, you got my vote. I told him when he called me.
You're going to mail it in?
Yeah, he's gonna. Yeah, we need as many mail-in votes from Texas.
I'm going to mail in 5.
Scott's all frozen. He doesn't even know it.
Uh-oh.
Anyways, sorry I froze there. I just
Well,
said
when you're talking nice things about me, you can't be freezing. That's
I
just
know.
the way-
I know. It's like I guess they didn't want to hear that. I said, yeah. I said I just can't wait to be his press secretary, beating the shit out of those reporters every day as Patriot Street Fighter.
So
But here's the thing. Based on what you just said, Lewis, again, I mentioned David Martin earlier, and I kind of veered off on a rabbit trail. But listening to him this past weekend, it was incredible in how he's had this transformation going on for years. But as he's given this presentation, he didn't get to do the rest of his PowerPoint. I said, you're doing it on Patriot Street Fighter, so we're going to work together on that. But he said basically the same thing. When we get to this, we won't have the need for governments. We're self-governing. We're divinely connected. We don't need them to organize our affairs. And you also mentioned, the states and counties. And again, that's why we push so hard on tactical civics, bringing back the constitutional county grand juries, where the people are convening the grand juries as the Constitution designated in its original architecture. And why do we do that? Why do they set it up that way? So we, the people, always keep control. Nobody, if they're corrupt or whatever, they can't get through that dragnet because they can't get elected to a local office. And the reason it's critical, and I have to cite this, Dr. Robert Young railroaded into prison, and his partner Galena who wouldn't testify against him, lies that they threatened her with. You either testify and say this in court, or we're going to charge you. They charged her for a crime. There's no crime, and she wasn't even involved. And I talked to her today. She's sitting in prison on a 4-year stint. He got 5 years. This is big pharma, FDA. This is a corrupt judge, a corrupt DA, an assistant DA, Gina Darva, and an investigator in this whole case too. Matthew Hazen's paid for the investigation on where the money's coming from. They're finding out through the mortgage scam industry. We now know because Sean Taylor alerted us to the whole Nashville cartel. This is how they're getting money. They've got the text messages. The investigators have it. And here's the thing. Judges in their construct, admiralty law, they sit up there as imperialists, say, okay, you're getting this many years. You're getting this many years. The juries in the counties who, number one, are a true jury of your peers. No court in the country, nobody faces a jury of their peers. These are all total strangers. Mm-hmm. If you were in front of a jury of your peers, like right here in Clearfield County, PA, and I'm from here, if I lived here, that's a situation where character counts, life history counts. If there's something that you're being accused of and people have seen you conduct your business all your life, they'll say, I don't believe that, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. And therefore, you have to make the case it's so solid and legitimate that people who know you as a good person, a law-abiding citizen, if they say, nah, you're guilty, it's very likely you're not going to have somebody sitting in prison that's not guilty. And that's the big thing we have to do, is put all of these controls back in the hands of the people themselves, because we have imperialists can just look. If I didn't rain a shitstorm down on this show twice on this whole case, I think Robert would have got 20 years, because I know they actually brought that up. They postponed a sentence twice, and then they brought me up in their sentencing. That shows the power of the people. When we are involved in everything, they're going to go better. They're going to be more fair and just. That's unjust, but I'm glad you said that, Lewis, because if we don't get back to where we govern personally our own affairs where we live, we're never going to have control of the country. I mean, we're never going to have control of the planet. So anyways, Josh, I want to get your viewpoint on the ongoing Trump mission to free the planet.
Yeah, it's interesting because we just had the 250th birthday of the U.S. Army, and then Trump's birthday and the big military parade. And I think I pointed this out on our last roundtable. I know you're driving, Scott, and it was just me, Nino, and Alpha. But this is what I want people to see. When do military tanks usually run down a street? When that country is being invaded. When do you raise the flag over their capital city? When you declare victory. What happened in those 4 days? Trump had a big military parade running the U.S. military army through Washington, D.C. He changed the height of the flag post from 100 feet to 88 feet, each flag post north and south. 88 represents rebirth, the resurrection. Wow. He raises the flag at the White House. The symbol, the heart of the deep state, has now been taken over by Donald Trump. This movement, what did he say in his famous speech? Our movement is about replacing the failed and corrupt bureaucracy. That's right.
Yep.
And he just declared victory on January 14th, January 12th. So think about that. Now, who's going to come in after Trump? I think that Trump is about legacy. I would see that probably Don Jr. would be groomed for something like that. Barron down the road, obviously. Maybe Eric. I also see people that are close within his inner circle. I think that there's a lot of good people to look at. One of them would be your chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff currently, which is General Dan Raisin Kane.
Raisin Kane, yeah.
Yep. He would be a good... Yeah, I don't think he wants a political life, but that guy is a badass, and he's a stoic. So he's a stoic. So he's very...
pragmatic.
Exactly. He knows how to deal with a lot of these situations that become very, very presidential. J.D. Vance, I don't know necessarily, but I think, J.D. Vance could be probably in there somewhere down the road. I don't necessarily know who's going to return, but I don't think Donald Trump's going to leave. I think that we're going to have another term with Donald Trump. I think we'll have 8 years with him from this year.
That would be truly epic. Here's a last question. How do you I just saw another rabbit, and the question I was going to ask you, I just slipped my damn mind. the hell was that? I got caught up in your answer, Josh.
Yeah.
Oh, here's what it is. Are people like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and some of these others, are they under white hat control, and or are they switched out?
White hat control. And Elon was gone for like a couple of weeks, and then he comes back with a black eye, and it looked like he might have a mask on. So we're seeing a lot of these people. I think are controlled, just like we saw with a lot of stuff in the Biden administration. A lot of that stuff is controlled.
You know, the one good thing about controlled people is that you can easily take control of those people, especially when their puppet masters are gone, removed, or disconnected. And so I would say that in the what I call the multi-headed hydra, the different tiers of the global infrastructure, is you have a controlling faction, and underneath that you have the corporations, you have a lot of the technocrats, you have a lot of the people who run manufacturing processing, and they just go along with the blackmail that's being utilized against them, or they just go along with everything that's happening, because if they don't, they're going to get replaced. All of their billions of dollars are going to go away. They're going to get killed in a boating accident, right? So they just go along with it. And once someone new comes into that head echelon at that head table, now they all shift gears, and now they're working for that guy. So I think that it's a mechanism of control. I think they're all controlled.
I can give you two examples of that, Josh. So, one, and I'm not going to call out names on purpose because it may just be giving away something secret that I don't know about. But there's one representative in the House of Representatives that had a lot of dirt on this person before that person was elected. And this one is 100% on the Trump train on every single thing that Trump wants. And I was told before this person was elected that this person was controlled by President Trump's team. And then something happened in Arizona. In Arizona, in the GOP, there was a guy named, I believe, Jim O'Connor that was going to be the Maricopa County GOP representative. He was a shoo-in. He had all the support. And many of you know, if you're watching, I did a lot of work in Maricopa County, seeing what I could do to help them out, because I think it's the one of the human trafficking hubs. Anyways, so I was very familiar that he was about ready to get in there. They were excited. And then in the 11th hour, Wendy Rogers and I almost said Katy Perry. Sorry, Wendy Rogers and wow, I can't even believe
Hobbs
what's that?
or I
No,
was thinking
no,
Hobbs, but
no, the Republican that got the election stolen from her over there.
Carrie Lake.
Carrie Lake, thank you.
Carrie Lake.
What the hell? So, anyways, Wendy Rogers, who I've had a huge issue with publicly, and I exposed her right to her face, and then Carrie Lake came in right before they were going to vote for the GOP, and they said, "Oh, President Trump just let us know that we're going to put all our efforts behind a person that wasn't eligible, Gina Svoboda," and Gina took that position. So I texted somebody that I know works with inside the Trump administration at Mar-a-Lago, and I got to be honest, I lost my shit. I said, what the F are you guys doing? You're sitting in your gosh darn crystal palaces there making the decisions when we had a We the People guy lined up. We're not going to put up with this. Took him 3 days to get back to me. Usually he gets back to me right away. He got back to me. He made sure I cooled down. He goes, I understand where you're coming from, and you're right. But a person like yourself and a We the People person right now may not be able to be controlled by the good guys to do the plan exactly the way we need to do the plan.
did they use those words, Lewis?
By the good guys, they said.
They use those words
Yes.
by the plan.
The plan.
There you
said
go.
The plan. Said the plan. Did not use the word white hats, but they did say the plan, and they said the good guys. And I sat back and I was pissed. And I said, I understand where you're coming from, but this is not the direction that we need to go in. And he says, I agree. Unfortunately, in order to get there, these are the type of things we can do. We have to have somebody that can be completely controlled to do what we need to do at this moment.
I'm with that. I'm absolutely with that 100%. In normal situations, no, but the deconstruction of the old guard, use their weapons against them. That's all they've been doing.
So what I said is, I said, you know what? I don't like it, but I can support it because we are in the midst of war and we're going to have to do some things we don't like.
Yeah.
Using their weapons against them.
Yep, and we've seen the people that are exposing themselves, whether they're part of the deep state or whether they're just knuckleheads. We saw a lot of them. We saw Thomas Massey. We saw Marjorie Taylor Greene today actually went against MAGA and Trump, and we also saw Mike Adams go against MAGA. Wow. So
Mike Adams has been against Trump for quite some time.
yeah, he has actually, but I mean,
I called him out and he replied.
Did he?
I did.
I mean, I like the guy. I went on a show one time. We talked to Archangel Michael. I'm not going to knock him. I don't agree with him, but there's a lot of people out there that are probably eating a lot of crow, especially right now.
I'm going to have to go back and watch this episode again because I know there's brilliant answers I'm missing from you guys because I keep freezing here intermittently and I can't hear you. But Mike Adams, who I love, Mike's one of my favorite podcasters in the world. He's been anti-Trump for a long time. He doesn't even believe in a Q operation, which I understand. Yet he's the guy that took the original live stream I ever did that laid the whole plan out and basically sent it, off into space. And I have mad respect for him. But I can understand if you have not, and he told me he has not ever read the operation. He just wasn't connected to it. And I can understand on the surface how sometimes you can look at Trump and say, I don't buy into this. And he's, one of the bad guys. I understand that because sometimes you have to look like a bad guy when you're, a good guy undoing what they've done. But that being said, I personally, these other people, I'm glad you said Massey. This guy's pissing me off. Popped up again today. And Marjorie Taylor Greene one or two other times. Same thing. And Mike, you and I had this discussion probably 2 years ago. A lot of folks were looking at DeSantis, right, as potential president. I'm like, you guys out of your mind? Nobody has ever done what Trump's done, at least not in my lifetime that I've seen. And I said, look, guys like DeSantis, they'll have all these wins, end the mask mandate, all this bullshit, giving you these little micro victories that aren't that big. But then they sign into law. I can't remember the bill that was done in late spring in 2022 or roughly, where inside there in this particular law they passed allowed in the declaration of a national emergency to quarantine the people and force a vaccine. I'm like, there you go. You can't overlook all these great things these bastards do, and they get us so on their side moving. You have so much inertia moving with them. Man, when they throw out the kill shot and you're moving at Mach 3 and it hits you in the chest and blows it open, you just keep sailing forward for another 200-300 yards because of the inertia. And it's the kill shot. So that's how these people play. And Massey obviously is this, and now Marjorie Taylor Greene, which doesn't surprise me. I've seen other times where she's been that way too, but she's a superhero over here. So these people, I'm telling you, we can't give them any latitude ever unless we know for a fact they're a part of the plan, playing out a certain, like an agonistic viewpoint in the theater that they're actually conducting. That's the only time, but that's why I never trust any of them.
Well, and we see that a lot with Donald Trump. That's one of the ways that he weeds out. I mean, the whole DeSantis thing, if we go back to the primaries with Trump and DeSantis, it was like a war between them. And what you saw was a divergence of the Republicans. You had neocons and fake MAGA all rally behind DeSantis, and then Trump won. And what happened? DeSantis was right by his side, arm to arm. They were best friends because that whole move was to separate and divide the people who are loyal to Trump and the people who weren't. And we see this a lot with Donald Trump. Like, whether he loves Tucker Carlson or not, the whole Tucker Carlson thing of him calling Tucker out the other day was to bring attention to Tucker Carlson, because now people go, what's Tucker talking about? And the first episode he drops is Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz is making an ass of himself to Tucker Carlson, being shown that he's an absolute controlled APAC neocon, right? So this is how Donald Trump operates through these transient comms, right? But he's an absolute genius how he does it. Now, I've no offense to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I've never liked Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think that that's just my thoughts. I don't like a lot of the things that politicians say. And you never trust a politician. I don't care who they are.
Ever.
Right? Ever. And a lot of these people that rally behind Donald Trump, especially at that level of Washington, D.C., they can't be trusted, because the next time some bigwig comes in and wins, they're going to be all over their dick and all over their agenda, because that's
Yep.
how it works in Washington, D.C. And see, I wish we had a better political system, but this is the representative republic that we have, unfortunately. But I believe that we're going to have a midterm election that is absolutely going to blow the minds of all of us. If we go back to the Q boards, you remember all the stuff
Mainly.
talking about the red waves during
Red
the
wave
midterms?
coming.
That's it. This
This one's
is
coming.
that deltas that are coming in, because
Mhm.
if we look at it, the Democrats defunded. USAID Act blew under investigation. They are defunded. They have no money to campaign. Donald Trump in 5 months has raised $600 million. It is going to be an absolute massacre. And here's the key, is Donald Trump's going to go in there and they're going to endorse the candidates that they want, the ones that are going to support and represent their actual people, not the ones that they needed to control the House during this point in time to make these transitions.
Yeah, and Josh, I think we're going to have a transition. I'm very open on my platform that the problem that we have right now is everybody focuses on the D and the R. We don't take accountability for our elections. We haven't for a long time, because what happens is we go, is it an R? Vote, 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 vote,
Yep.
all the way down. Is
Yep.
it a D? Vote, vote, vote. And I'm exposing that in a massive way. In fact, I'm running as an independent conservative, not as a Republican on purpose, because the Democrats are the snake at your front doorstep, and the Rhino Republicans are the snake that's in your bed. I would much rather have them at my doorstep, because I know what they're thinking and what they're doing. I don't
Yep.
want somebody kissing my ass and telling me something otherwise.
Like
The
that.
good news for my my platform and what we're doing, and it's a We the People run. It's not even a Lewis run. It's the We the People run. The beautiful thing is we have a jungle primary here. So I can run as space clown number 2 and still have an opportunity to win, because it's really about waking people up and explaining to them, all you JFK Democrats, you need to leave the plantation, because there's a better way, and it's right now. All you Republicans that have been lied to by the corrupt GOP in California, there's a place for you. And there's somebody that's listening, and it's going to be the party for We the People, because the construct is built to divide so they can manipulate us. It has been for a long time. When we start taking accountability, and this is where I hold the people accountable, we need to take accountability and say, you know what? This is probably the most important thing I could do every other year in this country, other than raise your children. The most important thing I can do is vote. Therefore, I have the responsibility to read any ballot issue thoroughly and to absolutely investigate the candidates myself to see. And this is my platform, is I'm going to plead on them not to vote for me, but to just really figure out what you're voting for. And I believe we're going to make a huge difference in this respect. At minimum, I'm going after the parasite controllers and exposing human trafficking and voter fraud at a level that's never been done before. And hopefully that will give other candidates the balls in other states to say, okay, maybe somebody that's just being authentic and cares can actually have a chance.
If there's any politician out there that is not bringing up child satanic ritual abuse and trafficking, don't give them your vote.
Yep. You can't.
Don't give them your vote. If they're
Well-
going to ignore the most pressing, devastating issue of our time on this planet right now, from an energy frequency standpoint, and they avoid the subject, it's like the stolen, returning the stolen diamonds of the 2020 election. I said that in 2022 on stages. There are candidates behind me, governor candidates, senators, congressmen. I said, any of these people, if they do not talk about the stolen election 2020, don't give them your vote. Probably pissed off a lot of them. I don't give a shit. This is about doing the right thing for the people. And if they do not have anything to say about child sex trafficking, ritual abuse, murder, don't give them your vote, because they're not truly in the game for you.
100%. And it's interesting, because you go back a few years ago, and you have Jim Jordan, and they're all talking in Congress about, we know where the 300,000 children that were smuggled into this country and went into child protective custody, we know where they're at. So now we're, 3 years down the road from that. Tom Homan says just a few weeks ago, we know where they're at. Well, why the hell aren't we using all the resources of the United States military, the United States government, to go get these children?
I can give you why from a statistic standpoint. This is one thing I'm constantly exposing. So, you look at the top three industries in the world, right? You have oil and gas is one. I'm sorry, the funding agents are the other one. The financial funding agents are the other one, so on and so forth. But I can tell you, the one's 5.3 trillion, one's 4.3 trillion, the other one's 4.3 trillion. The UN admits that human trafficking is 236 billion, and they're way off.
Yeah.
But you know what else they admit? And the UN's, we understand their corruption. The UN also admits that it could be only 5% of the reality because it's unreported.
Right.
Right. So if you say it's 5%, let's just say it's only 10%. Right. That would suddenly make human trafficking a $2.36 trillion industry.
That's it.
It gets better because guess what? Human trafficking is the only one that the government apparatuses and the UN recognize as pure profit in the number is human trafficking. So that's a $2.36 trillion minimum profit. The other ones I just mentioned run on an average of 10 to 15% profit. So now you take the top three industries together, and they don't equal the total profitability of human trafficking alone. This is why we don't hear about it, because this is the massive funding agent, the most money that's out there. And this is where we just going to say it. This is where they get their luge from. This is how they suck dry and get their satanic energy from. But it is the most profitable industry in the world. And until we recognize that, we have no place doing anything else.
You know what the greatest
100%
travesty about is that
Love
right
it.
now, I can tell you, is that it's being funded by taxpayer dollars at the government level. I have contracts on my computer right here that Daniel Brinkley sent me proving that the government, HHS, the contracts of trafficking these kids. And it's not just a
Uh-oh.
So
child sex trafficking. That's what everybody needs to be.
Touchy subject. They don't like it.
yeah,
Yeah, they definitely don't like that one.
Scott's freezing up, but I think I know where he's going.
People pick that up.
It's,
Did I freeze up again?
you
So,
did.
okay. So I was saying, people, we need to push on this constantly, asking our representatives, why are you not exposing the federal government funding agencies like Health and Human Services, who, again, the contracts Daniel sent me that are funding child sex trafficking? Why? And we got to keep hammering away on these
Yeah.
topics, like we have Kazarian Mafia, scumbag, whatever,
Right.
over the years, where people start, it gets in their mind. Yeah, I know it's all about money.
Yep. It's money and
Let me give
power.
you some statistics really quick that are really going to help with this. And this is I'm giving this to we the people, so you guys can go talk to anybody. These are real statistics, okay? So is it an average child that gets ripped out of their their family's home? It was worth about $150,000 to the system. And they're generally taken from CPS, which is feckless. CPS needs to go away and be if it's going to be there, they need to be reconstructed. So they're ripped out of their homes, and then $150,000 goes into the system where everybody gets paid except the kids. The kids get nothing out of it. And did you know that 60% of prostitutes, when they're arrested, minor prostitutes, are in the system itself in regards to God, I'm losing all my words today. Sorry, guys. Foster parenting. So they're in the foster care system. 60%. This is a fact. Only 2% that were ripped out of their homes were due to some form of molestation. So think about this: 150,000 in 2014. It was proven that 90% of the children could have stayed with their parents for an influx of $2,500. Because the reason why they were ripped out is because they had holes in their shoes, they didn't have the proper nutrition, and they may not have been clean enough. So we can educate parents, maybe get involved maybe in an education process, And I'm not into social service, but I can tell you what, though, I'd much rather spend $2,500 to keep a family together than spend $150,000 and increase their likelihood of being put into child trafficking. No brainer. Those are real statistics. Those are real solutions that we can do right away.
Well, we need to take away the party of slavery, which is Democrats. Who let all these children in the last 4 years? Democrats. You mentioned John F. Kennedy being the party of slavery. Yes, because in 1957, Senators John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson criticized President Eisenhower, Republican, of course, for deploying the 82nd Airborne Division to Little Rock, Arkansas, to uphold the civil rights and integrate them into public schools. So, it's still slavery for these people. What are they doing right now? They're protesting illegal immigrants because they want them for their slaves. It's the same thing. It's a stealth civil war we got going on right now with the Democrat Party. We have to do away with that. And I love what Josh said. We're going to and all of us, you too, Scott, we're going to blow away these people in the midterms. We have to. We have to vote them out because they're the party of slavery. And slavery, what's the most profitable slavery right now? Child sex trafficking slavery. So we have to get rid of these Democrats, guys. I've been beating this drum so hard for years, and they're still here. And they're more powerful than they've ever been. Well, not now for the last 6-7 months, but it's a travesty. We have to get rid of them.
Well, and that's the hopes, is that the midterm is a red wave and we get super majority. And then, Scott, that goes to one of your previous questions. Once we get super majority in the Senate and the House, guess what happens next? We can repeal the provisions in the 20th Amendment that restrict Donald Trump from running for a third term.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also need to repeal the 17th, where it gave senators a popular election in each state.
100%.
That's why we got
bring it back to the states.
The states can you get a Republican House of Representatives, a Republican Senate, but 2 Democrats in Washington D.C. as U.S. senators. That's just complete bullshit. If people don't know this, the 17th Amendment allowed it to be a popular vote versus the legislatures themselves vote who they want to send as senators. You have 2 Republicans, conservative state. You're going to have 2 senators in Washington representing the real interest. My belief is the 17th Amendment is where we lost complete 100% control of our own federal government right there with that amendment. These bastards knew that, of course. That's why they got it passed. But, in essence,
we could have stopped at the 10th Amendment, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're probably right. Hell yeah. I mean, look what they did. They eliminated the 13th Amendment in the U.S. Corporation Constitution, right? And basically made us all slaves. So,
well, that's the codified in the 14th Amendment. I mean, I love wordsmithing, but if you look at the 14th Amendment, well, number one, 13th Amendment is slavery, neither slavery or involuntary servitude, right? But look at the opposite. So, because the Declaration declares that all men are created equal, endowed with their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which means that we are already free. So we don't need the 13th Amendment. But if you look at the 13th Amendment, it says it interestingly. Inverse the words. Opposite of slavery, freedom. Opposite of involuntary servitude, voluntary servitude. That's contractual slavery. So 13th Amendment comes around, establishes contractual slavery. 14th Amendment says what? All persons born in the United States shall be citizens of the United States and follow the jurisdictions of the respective states, right? But the word person is not defined in the 14th Amendment. It's defined in the 4th Amendment that all people have the right to be secure in their person. Your person is a legal entity, a legal identity. It is a fictitious entity.
Yep.
Which means that the 14th Amendment has established that all legal, fictitious entities created are now citizens and fall under the United States and the state's jurisdiction.
Yep, citizen. I hate the idea of the word citizen. We still have to use this stuff. Our entire English language is built on the inverse of its own meaning, so we give the negative satanic energy to everything we say in our own realm. That's one thing that is going to be a long-term problem to solve, is our own English language. It's all constructed to work against us on an energy vibration level. How the hell do we overcome that?
That is going to be teaching our children well, man. That is a generational thing, and it starts in the household. Like, from the start of all of this started in the household. It came with the erosion of the nuclear family in the 1940s, with back-to-back world wars, with the attack by the bankers in 1929, which led us into the Great Depression. Here's the thing: is there was plenty of seed to sow in the farms. There was plenty of people to work, but the farmers held, or not the farmers, the bankers held the money back so nothing could be done. And so this produced this erosion of the family unit, of family groups living on farms. 1929 had severe implications. And I mean, this gets into the whole function of the Federal Reserve coming on a 20-year charter studied in 1913. The Roaring Twenties were created by interest-free money that was pumped into these small hometown banks, right? And they couldn't get rid of the money, so they had to lower the interest rate to zero. And then farmers collateralized their farms, took these loans out, and this is what generated the Roaring Twenties. Well, then the bankers crashed the banks in 29, and they took over all these small hometown banks. And then what? They took in the collateral, which was the farms. That led us directly into the Great Depression, but that also broke up the massive family unit, because back then, parents and their siblings and their parents, generations all lived on the farms and the lands together. But when the bankers took all that back, it wrecked it and began to destroy it. And then we get into World War II. You have this long, drawn-out 10-year war. And what happens? We come out of that with modernization. And now it's a focus on education and the allopathic medical system, which begins poisoning us. So, yeah, it started a long time ago. So to fix it, it starts at home. It starts with having the right conversations with your kids, bringing them up with whatever your ethical, moral base is, but with an ethical and moral base. It starts with having conversations across the fence with your neighbors. I've always said that Washington, D.C. is a direct reflection of your internal house. Why? Your internal house is a direct reflection of who your kids are going to be and how you react in society. How your community reacts is a direct reflection of all the homes in that community. How your city acts is a direct reflection of all the communities. How the state acts and who they represent in their government is a direct reflection of all of those cities and those communities and all those homes. And then how the federal government is operating as a federal entity is a direct reflection of all of those states, communities, cities, and households. So it all starts in the household, I think.
I would say to that, Josh, I would say that is 100% true, except for the last 30 or 40 years when they've been hijacking all the elections and stacking the deck against us, no matter how we voted. But you're right. I've said this is kind of my new tagline is we have to be the change. Personally, we have to be the change that we want to see in the world, personally, at home, in every way. Well, gentlemen, this has been epic because we've been at it for 2 hours. Typically, it's just a radio show, simultaneous broadcast. And we always have a break at the top of the hour. Smoked right through that. So what I'm going to say is give me 2 seconds to throw out 2 event flyers here. And if you have these up, Lisa, can you pull up one event flyer? Is that possible? I got 2 Tactical Civics events I want you to know about. We have one coming up this Saturday, June 28th. Clearfield County, right here, my hometown where I grew up, number 2 county in the country for Tactical Civics. And that is doors open at 6 o'clock. That is at the Hyde Fire Hall, 1618 Washington Avenue. Look in the description box. You'll see it. The next one I'll attend is in Georgia, Hoboken, Georgia. Rob Lane, the country recording artist who actually created the song County Grand Jury for this movement, which I think was helped it explode into the ethers. He'll be there performing. This is Hoboken, Georgia. Again, you'll see the information down below. This is Hoboken Community Center in Hoboken, Georgia. You can see the information there here on the screen. But good enough for that. I just want to thank have this kind of a dialogue going on in the chat. And as I just continue to look over a couple of times, and we continue to increase the numbers that are watching live, and I haven't been consistent lately. They're down a little bit for now, but they're the live broadcast is as I will. We might have froze again. I'm going to wait for 1 second. See, I don't know if I froze again, but what I was saying is people keep joining into this live stream. I'm watching numbers keep climbing up. Word's getting out. You guys are putting on an epic show tonight. So I want to thank you for coming in. Much love to all you guys. the incredible work you've done over the last number of years. Heroic, Mike, for decades and decades, and all the stuff you guys have been doing. So thanks for being superstars here tonight. It was epic, and I'm going to go back and watch it all myself so I can get some of the things that I missed. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Jaco, Lewis Herms, John.
Of course, he breaks up at my.
That was Josh Reed, if
Josh
anybody
Reed.
knows it.
All right.
Lisa, are you okay? I think, is Mike off? Yeah. Hey guys, that was awesome. Thanks for giving me 2 hours on this. That